All right, so last time we talked about the rule of 10, 10, 20, and I mentioned that I would go through each 10 part. And again, this is a rule that I have given to other people and help them use it and help them get to a point financially where they were okay. It's one that I've finally began to use this year. It's crazy. So I saw it a while back, but I've really began to be intentional about implementing it this year. And I will say that it has been a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful thing that has happened for our household. So now remember the rule of 10, 10, 20. I think if you apply this principle to your finances and to your life, it'll kind of help you no matter what. It's just my belief. And I think it'll bring some reality or realization too about where you are in your finances, but I think it'll help you in your household and your finances, in your individual finances, maybe for businesses as well. I haven't really looked at it from a business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, yes, I have. So here we're gonna go. The rule of 10, 10, 20. And remember that I told you, I know you think you know, but you don't know. And so we're gonna use the scriptures to kind of help pull out the point of why or how I came up with this particular rule. Now, so let me say, for New Testament, for believers in Christ, I don't believe that the New Testament requires believers to give a tithe. I don't see it. I do see the example where it talks about Abraham giving to Melchizedek, but even when you read the actual story, there's nothing in the story that suggests he was made of force. For the two people that you do show before the law was given that they were paying tithe, it seemed as if though it was just a cheerful giver or someone who wasn't pressured to give or being forced to give, nor did they give out of necessity, nor were they giving sob stories or being made, what's the word I'm looking for? Forced is the right word, but that's not what I'm scared. They weren't scared into giving. As if though it was just done because it was something that was done that was deep in their heart that they wanted to give. So for me, and I'm not against tithing because I tithe, but my heart, when I discovered this particular text, a friend brought it to me, and I started like really reading it. What I'm about to show you today didn't make me not want to give a tithe. And as you imagine, it made me want to tithe all the more. You know what I'm saying? However, again, I don't believe for those of us who are believers in Christ that we are required to give 10%. I think it's highly recommended. I mean, even just from, not from just from a biblical standpoint, but I think just in the law of reciprocity, even for people who are not believers, they give a tithe, or they give 10% of their income. So if people who are not believers, if they understand the concept or the principle of tithing or giving a tenth, then we should too as well as believers. However, again, if you don't have it to give, I don't think God is upset at you for not giving 10%, but I do believe it's a good starting place or a starting point to give. So in the rule of 10, 10, 20, the first 10%, actually you are to give it away. Now, let's go here. For those who are adamant about making people give 10%, like if you're adamant about it and you're using Malachi 3 and 10 as your basis for a person who is coming up in the church that they have to give 10%. Okay, well, if that's the case, then why not use, and this is where we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 through 29. I'm going to actually read it in the NLT version. And so here's how it reads in the NLT. It says, you must set aside, so I'm going to read the whole thing, and I'm going to, I guess, break it down, but then we'll talk about it and discuss it. It says, you must set aside a tithe of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, and eat it there in his presence. This applies to your tithes of grain, of new wine, olive oil, the firstborn males of your flocks and herds. Doing this, and this is where I feel like this is the part I think it marries with Corinthians. It says, doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. That's verse 23. And in the King James, it says that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. Verse 24, it says, now then the Lord your God blesses you with a good harvest. Now when the Lord your God blesses you with a good harvest, the place of worship he chooses for his name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds and put the money in a pouch. So a lot of times people talking and say, well, back then they didn't have money. Well, in the NLT, the King James Version, the New King James Version, and the God's Words Version translation, they all say money. So they did have money back then. Put the money in a pouch and go to the place the Lord your God has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want, cattle, sheep, goats, wine, other alcoholic drinks. Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and celebrate with your household. And do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. At the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of the year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you, the orphans, the widows in your towns, so that they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all of your work. Now, let's go back. Verse 22 through 27. You must set aside the tithes of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops each year. Here's the thing. Bring the tithe to the designated place of worship, the place your God chooses for his name to be honored. Eat it there in his presence. So and then we go to verse 27. So that's 22, 23, 27. It says, and do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. So now here we go. The whole purpose that I'm asking. Again, my point is not to make you pay tithe. I'm just saying what the text says. The text says that when we do this, doing this, you will always fear the Lord your God. All right. So if we're going to teach and if we're going to make people pay tithe, then why not use Deuteronomy 14 as a basis for how we teach people how to pay tithe or how to give 10%? Because in this particular text, if you read it, and it's interesting, it's funny that when people are reading it, how they still miss it. It says, you must set aside a tenth, bring this tithe to a place God has for you, there eat it in his presence. So if we modern day this thing, then if we're saying, okay, listen, you take the tithe, and then this is for people who are forcing people to pay tithe. If that's the case, then also tell the people that the first 2 years, take the tithe, enjoy the tithe, enjoy a portion of the tithe with you and your family in the presence of the Lord. Now, again, it's not saying neglect the Levites. It's saying don't neglect the Levites. But in this context, it doesn't really say how much should go to the Levites and how much should go between you and your family. But it is saying, whatever you tithe, enjoy the tithe with your family. But people are not teaching that. They only go to the Malachi part. It says, bring all your tithe into the storehouse. So let's deal with that. So because this third year part, this is where I think the Malachi part ties in with the third year. All right, here we go. Verse 28. It says, and at the end of every third year, that means the first 2 years, guess what? I am enjoying my tithe with my family, a portion. Now, if I had to say, just to be fair, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe you tie the tithe to the Levites. You know what I'm saying? So you take a tithe, and then you take a tithe and give it to the Levites. I don't know. The text doesn't say, so I really can't say. For me, I can say, what we were doing at one point was taking 50%. So we would tithe, take 50%. 50% will go to the church. 50% will go for the family to enjoy a meal and give honor to God in the presence of the Lord. So the first 2 years, that's what's happening with the tithe. The family is taking it, they're enjoying it with their family, but they're not neglecting the Levite, or in this case of modern day, they're not neglecting the church. Here's the every third year. And this is what I think Malachi ties in. At the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of that year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as the foreigners living among you, the orphans, the widows in your town, so that they can eat and be satisfied. So doing this, God will bless your work. So for me, and this is me modern day in it, the Levites, it's the church. All right, give to the church. The foreigners are people who don't have, that's not their home. So out of this tithe, you bring the entire tithe and you give it to, you split it 4 ways among the Levites, let's say among the church, among the foreigners, so the homeless, among the orphans, and among the widows. So if we're gonna do that, that means, go back again, to be redundant on purpose. The first 2 years, you're taking the tithe and you are splitting the tithe between you and the church. The third year, of every third year, you're giving the entire tithe, and and so let's say you're giving to your church, then you're requesting to your church, this $100 I'm giving you, give 25 to the church, 25 to the homeless, 25 to the widows, and $25 goes to orphans. Like, you can do that. So again, if we're gonna teach tithing this way, if we're gonna force tithing, then let's do it toward according to the Deuteronomy 14. Now, here's my thing. Here's my thing about this. There are people who tithe, and they tithe the entire tithe to the church. I'm okay with that. I'm not tripping about that. I'm like, it is what it is. It is what it are. And people have said how blessed they are because they do the tithe, and that's great. My point is, I don't think we are required. I do think it's recommended. And because of the example of tithing actually working for the people, because tithing, according to verse 23, says when we do this, it'll teach us to always have a reverence for God. It'll teach us always to be in respect for God, because at the end of the day, all of it belongs to God anyway. But we're saying, okay, God, you've given me this, and so therefore I'm going to give a portion of it back, or I'm going to use a portion of it to do what your word says to do and do the running. I'm going to take that concept and live my life that way. Now, at the end of the day, there are some people saying, listen, I get it. I can't tithe right now. I am saying that at that point, if that's you, give what you can. I'm not I used to say that, like, if you don't have anything, then give your time and your talent, and I still believe that. But I think there's always something that we can give. Remember now, our giving always teaches us to fear, always teaches us to have fear or reverence for the Lord. So there's a spiritual connection in giving for the work of the ministry to be done. You feel what I'm saying? So there are people who are saying, I don't have it. Okay, if that's you, like you really don't have it, okay, but what can you give? You feel what I'm saying? And then at the end of the day, which is why we do when we're working with couples and when I'm working with people for the life insurance, we do an expense tracker, because why can't you give? It's like, okay, who has God's money? You feel what I'm saying? Like, who has the money or who has the tithe that can be used for orphans, widows, church, mission, homeless, all the things that are operating now in the body. So who has that? So let's find that so that you can begin to apply the principle of tithing or the principle of giving 10%. And again, I don't want you to get hung up on, all these, like giving, I'm giving 10, I'm giving 15, giving 5, like whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, God really wants a cheerful giver. But I'm saying, to me, when I discovered this and I saw this and I was like, wait a minute, hold up. Okay, that makes sense to me. It actually freed me all the more to give 10%. You feel what I'm saying? So again, the rule of 10, 10, 20. The first 10 is that it has to be given away. You can do it according to Deuteronomy 14 verses 22 through 27. You can split it in half and invite the family over. Like if you make a lot of money, whatever, and it's just like that's too much money just for y'all at the house, but it's enough. Your tithing, if you split your tithe in half, it's enough to feed the family. Okay, then invite the family over to your house and then let them know, hey, this meal that we're eating, this is because of the Lord. And at this point, you get to witness God, and then you give 50%. The other half of the tithe, you give it to the church, and just, hey, church is what y'all do. And then every third year, you're taking your tithe and you're giving a fourth of it to the church. Tell the church, like, you can give it all and then designate it, or you yourself take a fourth of it, give it to the church. Take 1/4, give it to the orphans. 1/4, give it to the widows. 1/4, give it to the homeless. But you do want to have a practice of giving the money away, like blessing somebody else in the process as God begins to bless you. All right. So again, the rule of 10, 10, 20. The first 10% is the 10% that you give away, and the law of reciprocity, I just believe, will happen. But I'm not giving because I'm being forced. I'm not giving because I think bad things gonna happen to me. I'm not giving because for sad stories and sob stories. I'm not allowing the preacher to arm twist me. I'm not trying to buy a blessing from nobody. I'm giving because it's gonna teach me, according to Deuteronomy, it's gonna teach me how to continue to have fear and reverence for God. So that's the first 10. Catch you next week about the second 10. All right, take care. Listen, don't forget, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you hit, give us a thumbs up. Make a comment. What do you feel? How do you think? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you not agree with what I'm saying? And look for new videos that Shemika and I will be dropping. You got to hit that bell notification, because we drop videos like, like new artists. We might come out at 12 midnight on a new video. You don't know. So hit the bell notification so you can be notified. All right. Take care.